Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening. I am calling this public hearing to order at 6:03 p.m. in accordance with the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, MGLC 131, Section 40, in the Boston Wetlands Ordinance, Boston City Code Ordinances, Chapter 7-1.4. The Conservation Commission will hold a virtual public hearing on March 1st, 2023, to review the following projects to determine what conditions, if any, the Commission will impose in order to protect the interests of the public and private water supply, groundwater, prevention of pollution, flood control, prevention of storm damage, protection of fisheries and land containing shellfish, and protection of wildlife habitat. This evening, the Commission will hold a series of public hearings followed by our regular meeting. In accordance with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, we are conducting this meeting online. To ensure public access to the deliberations of the Conservation Commission, the public may access this call through telephone and video conferencing. Additionally, the meeting is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your video. Members of the public may have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on the applications and discussions. To do so, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle at BostonConcom. Wait, this is different. At Boston Enviro and using the hashtag Concom hearing. Sorry. For the record, I am Michael Parker, Chair of the Commission, and staff who is present, could you please identify yourself?
Allison Brizius, Environment Department.
Pat Ushel, Environment Cabinet.
Christopher Edwards, Environment Department.
Great, thank you. Now I'll call the roll of commissioners present this evening. Commissioner Sullivan.
John Sullivan.
Commissioner Long.
Nick Long, present.
Commissioner Conan.
Anand Thiruvengadam, present.
Thank you. Commissioner Richmond.
Present, thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the first item on the agenda tonight is notice of intent for DEP file number 0061907 and Boston file number 2022-056 from Norse Environmental Services, Inc. on behalf of Estuary 2 Development Group, LLC, for the proposed construction of a 3-story, 14-unit residential building, walkway, driveway, retaining wall, drainage system, and associated utilities and landscaping located at 173 to 175 Street, Dorchester. The resource area is land subject to coastal storm flowage, and this hearing's been continued from the February 1st, 2023 hearing. Who's here on behalf of the proponent?
Hello, this is Tim Johnson, the project architect, along with Maureen Harold from Norse Environmental Services and Guillermo Beltran from Spruhan Engineering.
Great, thank you. Okay, so last time we left you, we continued the hearing because the commissioners wanted to hear from Commissioner Sullivan regarding stormwater issues. So I think I have that right. Was there anything else that we had outstanding on this hearing?
No.
Okay, thank you. So with that, Tim, I would leave it up to you whether you want to do a very brief presentation or we just get right into it and talk with Commissioner Sullivan here.
We can give another presentation, sir, but if Mr. Sullivan would like to begin opening, that would be fine with us.
Okay. I'll just ask Allison first if she has any comments.
No additional comments.
Okay, and as always, want to remind members of the public to provide public comment. Please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle at Boston Enviro and using the hashtag Concom hearing. Commissioner Sullivan, you're on the spot. I know you've reviewed stormwater, you've reviewed the entire application and paid attention to the stormwater issues. What do you have for us?
So I not only reviewed the stuff that was presented as the NOI, but they also reviewed the stuff that was sent to the Boston Water Sewer Commission as it may impact the water and sewer facilities in Walnut Street. I am in full agreement that we should go ahead and approve this project. We have done extensive work on coastal flooding. We've done extensive work on impacts to our system. I reviewed what they're proposing. They're doing more than I would have expected for a building being built where it is. There was questions about the pump system. That's an overflow system from the infiltration system. We have no problems with it. We are ready to sign the approval plan as it impacts our system. They're actually going to build a public facility for us in Walnut Street, a 15-inch drain line pipe. And that's just what's hanging it up. We have some little hangups on some legal parts. But as far as the functionality of that system and meeting all the requirements for the stormwater, we have no issues at all with the building. So I would entertain any questions from the commissioners or whatever. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm ready to vote approval
Okay,
for the order conditions.
great, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Long, have you familiarized yourself with this NOI?
I have, yes.
Okay, do you have any questions? And I guess we would be directing them at Commissioner Sullivan if you could.
No questions at this time.
Great, thank you. Let's see, Commissioner Conan.
Thank you, Chair Parker. Oh, that's good to hear this vote of confidence from Commissioner Sullivan. I was just curious about the Boston Water Sewer Commission reports seem to take into consideration stormwater and high tide. This particular location also happens to be at the mouth of a river. And when you put together the rain and the flooding from the ocean and flooding from the river, are you concerned still, or do you still believe that the eventualities are addressed here?
Yeah, so our analysis goes out to 2050 and 2070. And that's our best guess in using our modeling. There may be localized flooding on the property. They have ways of taking care of it with letting the water get underneath the foundation. We don't see anything more than maybe about a foot at the worst case condition. This is one of those horrible storms at high tide with the storm surge. And all our facilities and the roadways will also be flooded. The city is undertaking studies as well as ourselves on how to mitigate these problems in the future. But right now, we see no problems at all with the construction of this. We don't see any impacts on the building itself and the residents of the building. We believe that if the streets were to get flooded, the Port Norfolk lockup will take a bit of water. People will be able to get in and out of the building. Maybe a little wet, but they can do it. This is in 2050. So we have no problem at all with approving the plans.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. So this may be a more general question, Chair Parker. The building's design life goes beyond 2050, right?
I would assume so, but Tim, do you want to answer that question?
Yes, typically the construction, type 5A construction that we do in the city of Boston has a shelf life of a minimum 50 years. Here, we will be using all engineered lumber for the construction of the project. This is, again, has its own warranty. Each manufacturer of either the LVL or the LSL column have an individual warranty. So this will be a well-constructed building with minimum 50-year shelf life.
Okay, so if the building starts today, then it goes into 2073. And Commissioner Sullivan's analysis only goes to 2050, it appears. Just an observation. I know that as climate change rages on and flooding comes from all directions, it's something to keep in mind. But I'm happy to hear the vote of confidence and also other confirmations from other commissioners.
I would like to just suggest that our analysis does go to 2070. It's just that as you get out further and further with all the unknowns and all the guesses that you do in modeling for future climate changes, I mean, that's always changing. Our high tide analysis in 2050 is actually lower now than it was 3 years ago, because we learned more. We are monitoring, we are monitoring rain gauges, we monitor everything using NOAA stuff. Woods Hole just updated the model for Boston Harbor, just got through doing it for MassDOT. We update our systems with that. We're about to spend another $2 million redoing our inundation models. Because the more we learn, the finer we're getting into these numbers. And so with that, we were confident.
Right, that's good to hear. So maybe I just misheard you on the 2050. I think you said 2070.
Yeah, no, we have done the 2070. I did mention 2050. I'll watch my language a lot closer this time.
Right, no worries. Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Thank you, Chair Parker.
Okay, Commissioner Richmond?
I consider it, I want to say this on the record. I consider it a privilege to be on this commission with Commissioner Sullivan. And I really don't have any questions based on what he has reported. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'll thank you for Commissioner Sullivan. That was a very nice sentiment. Okay, Commissioner Herbst is not with us. I don't have anything. I think we'll go to the public. I see Ms. Lyons has her hand raised.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. I hope you all have been able to look over the updated document that I sent to the Conservation Commission concerning this proposal with photos and maps. This proposal has the unique problem of being land subject to coastal flooding from the ocean and inland parcel to stormwater flooding from the Neponset River, as Keenan has mentioned. Why should the proposal be denied? Because the Port Norfolk Peninsula already has severe flooding issues. Maybe Mr. Sullivan hasn't been down here in a storm, but the residents have. It isolates it from the inland already, not 2030, not 2050, now. The entire end of the peninsula has been flooded underwater during storms, including this property. I sent pictures of that. I hope you will look at it. This will only get worse due to climate change and sea level rise. And I believe that the Boston Water and Sewer inundation maps say this area will be under 2 feet of water. It makes no sense to add multiple units into this in harm's way. Another reason is to save the green space, cutting down mature trees, some of them specimen red maple tree, white birches and oaks, and paving over a green lot, ruining the habitat of birds and other wildlife. The area contains rainwater and seawater in a large depression, which serves as a retention pond for the neighborhood area. The trees also help to mitigate the heat island effect. The filling of the depression with gravel and paving area over 70% of the property will increase the flooding into the surrounding areas. No matter what their plan says, I just don't believe it. The plan cannot capture it all. It will overflow into the existing estuary condo, driveway, parking area, Port Norfolk Yacht Club, Walnut Street, and surrounding houses. The plan will release rainwater and seawater into the stormwater pipes. I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan, but I've already seen the water backing up into Walnut Street. Perhaps you haven't. And this is only going to get worse if they're sending their water into the pipe as well. We know that they shut down during the high levels of water. I sent a picture, perhaps you've seen it, of the water already backing up into Walnut Street. The granite pit, now this is something that nobody's mentioned yet, but I read this in the BPDA guidelines for the climate resiliency overlay. Now, I know this is a smaller project, so it doesn't fall under their regulations, but the guidelines are there for smaller projects as well. And it says the gravel pit will become contaminated with bacteria and fungus. It's talking about wet flooding guidelines. And these areas, when they become flood, will become contaminated with bacteria and fungus. It will smell, it will be unhealthy to the people living there in the surrounding area. And it needs to be cleaned. How are you going to clean a gravel pit? Are you going to put bleach in it and then dump it into the ACEC? Because all of these storm drains go into the ACEC, and it's illegal to dump contaminants into the ACEC. So that's a problem that nobody's even talked about. And if you look at the BPTA guidelines that I sent, it talks about it, and it says it's a serious issue. So in my package that I sent, it had the NEPA wetland regulations, the climate resiliency overlay flood guidelines, and the Boston wetland ordinance that I think apply to this project, and there's plenty of them. So I hope you've looked at it before you vote on this. I hope you'd come to the neighborhood and look at the neighborhood before you vote on this project. we see what's happening. It's already happening here. And no matter what your predictions are, we know what's going on here. Perhaps the Boston Water and Sewer Commission could use this property and the lot next to it as part of its climate resiliency retention areas or its proposals. I've seen the proposal for the park next door, and frankly, it's going to ruin the park. You have these areas already there. Would it be cheaper for the city to buy these properties and make them part of the climate resiliency plan instead of allowing somebody to build on them now? That's just a thought that I think everyone should be thinking about. So I think it's premature to vote on this and to pass it. I think it needs a lot more consideration. Thank you for letting me speak.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lyons. Anyone else, Allison?
I don't see any other hands raised. I would just note you also have a letter from Mr. Roach in your
Yes.
folder, and we
Saw
have
that.
an phone that would like to speak now.
Okay. So we have an unidentified iPhone with a hand up, who I believe is unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, could you identify yourself, please?
I will. My name's Steve Tankel. I live at 170 Walnut Street, directly across from this proposed project as Maria Lyons. My question to Mr. Sullivan is the same thing Maria Lyons brought up. Have you been down here in the last few storms or surges when that, I'm going to call it a pond? I don't know the exact dimensions of it, but if it wasn't there, it probably would have went on halfway up Walnut Street. How do you propose when we have these surges coming up from the river in the rain and whatever else you have? What's going to stop that from continuing up Walnut Street to flood all our basements? And you can't say it's, once in a while. It happens often, very too often, as a fact, but there's nothing we can do with the weather. You say that Boston Water and Sewer has done studies. I'm not too sure they looked at this part of it. I'm not saying they didn't, but something that floods in this nature, and if that hole where they're going to probably put the foundation in the building itself, which I really have no problem with, the 14 units and other things that are for another meeting. But that pond is probably 12 feet deep, 100 by 200. I don't know how much water that takes to fill up, but it has been filled up often. Do you have an answer for that, or where's that water going to go?
Okay, so let me pose the question to Commissioner Sullivan if he wants to answer. Some of your questions were pretty wide ranging and touch on BWSC matters. So Commissioner Sullivan, I'll give you the option of if you'd like to respond and to the scope that you'd like to respond to the questions.
Sure. Well, first of all, you should know I'm a resident of Dorchester, been here for 30 years. I've been down the entire Port Norfolk area extensively. You enjoyed our construction that we've done over the last 2 years, improving your sewer system and drainage system in all the streets, including the fire system. We upgraded all that. I'm extensively aware of what's going on, and I was terrifically involved with the flooding for the 2050, et cetera, in the Joseph Finnegan Park that you may look at on our website, on our page. You'll see what we're proposing. We do know what happens. We do go down there. We see Connolly Street flooding. We see the water coming up in the playground. We know all of that. And we're working with the city to protect not this one parcel. We're looking to protect the neighborhood. And that neighborhood is part of the fabric of our entire city, a city which I've worked for 51 years. So yeah, I know all about your systems. I know where your sewage goes, and I know Chickatobit Pump Station. I was involved with building that in the 70s. So Steve, I'm quite aware of everything down there. And based on that, I'm as I sit on this as a civilian, not as the chief engineer of the water and sewer, but I just bring both to the table and explain to you, we look out for that neighborhood and we care about that neighborhood.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Okay, is there anybody else from the public? Allison?
And no, nothing in the email, Twitter, and I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Seconded.
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second,
Great, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
aye.
and I vote aye, so that carries 5-0. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for DEP file number 0061925, Boston file number 2023-012 from Foth Infrastructure and Environment LLC on behalf of Wholesome US Charlestown Terminal for the rehabilitation of timber bulkhead with installations of steel piles and precast concrete blocks and replacement of the revetment located landward of the bulkhead located at 285 Medford Street in Charlestown. Resource areas, designated port area, land underwater, coastal banks, rocky intertidal shores, fish runs, land subject to coastal storm flowage. This was continued from the February 15th, 2023 hearing, I believe, because there was not a DEP number or Boston file number assigned. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
I am Jeremy Packard from Foth Infrastructure.
Great.
Good evening. I'm here on behalf of Wholesome US, and my colleague Benjamin Foley is also on the line as well. So I believe we had sent a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not sure if you guys run that or if I do, or I can just talk.
Yeah, we
I'm
run
happy
it.
to just talk through it.
There
as
we
well.
go.
Okay.
No,
all
we're right
Yeah.
there.
Perfect.
You can just let me know when it's time to advance slides and I'll advance them for you.
Okay, great. Next slide, please. This is an industrial site. We're in a designated port area. Wholesome US, their location here in Charlestown on the southern shores of the Mystic River is used for the shipping, receiving, short-term storage of cement products to and from the Boston area. So they have the solid fill wharf. We are calling it a wharf. It extends out far enough. Solid fill pier. So the coastal protection system along the western shores of this is in a state of disrepair. And so the notice of intent submitted to the commission for this includes the rehabilitation of that shoreline protection system. Next slide, please. So the existing additions along the western shores of this solid fill pier are there's the decrepit timber retaining wall. You can see there on the seawardmost section at the bottom of the slope there. The timber bulkhead used to be at full height, at the same height as the roadway on top of the pier. In 2004, that was cut down to mean low water elevation, and the slope was armored with riprap there to stop any kind of erosion entering the waterway. Since that work was performed, the timber bulkhead has continued to deteriorate, and as you can see, there is in a state of significant disrepair. Next slide, please. So this is the existing additions cross section. The important part to note here is, again, the timber bulkhead that is cut down to just about the mean low water elevation, all the way at the bottom of the stone slope shown there, and the existing roadway up on top of the solid fill wharf. You can see that with the continued deterioration of that bulkhead, the risk is that we will lose the material, both the riprap and the fine material, fine sediment from the solid fill wharf, and we are at risk of losing the entire roadway on top and allowing that to enter the waterway. The top of the wharf is just below the FEMA flood zone, so we're in a FEMA AE 11. And the top of the roadway is at about a 10.6. So in a 100-year storm event, we are underwater on this. And next slide, please. So the proposed condition really just intends to restore the existing condition. We intend to drive steel H piles just landward of the existing timber bulkhead. So steel H piles are driven at 5 feet on center along just landward of the existing bulkhead, and then 5 by 5 by 1 foot thick concrete panels are then placed in between the flanges of the driven H piles. And so that creates a new bulkhead in approximately the same location, actually slightly landward. And that stops the continued loss of the toe of that slope. And then the top elevation of that bulkhead is slightly higher than the timber bulkhead that you see there. And that is to allow for the riprap slope to achieve a more stable 1.5 to 1 slope, right? So the current condition is about a 1 to 1, which is it's stable, but it's not as stable as you'd like it to be, really, especially considering that it is in a tidal. It's below the mean high water line, but it is above mean low. I'm sorry, it's below the mean high water, but it's above mean low water. So you do have some tidal flushing here. And so installing the top of the new bulkhead slightly higher than the timber one that exists there allows us to achieve a more stable 1.5 to 1 slope on that riprap, on the riprap slope. And when that work is completed, we will just reinstall the guardrail next to the roadway. So same limit of work, no expansion. We're staying in the footprint. We propose to put geotextile, a permeable geotextile down on the slope before installation of the riprap. And that's to eliminate any kind of loss of fine material through the voids in the stone material. All the material on site now, the stone will be reused and supplemented as necessary with new stone just to get full coverage of the slope. Total length of the work proposed is about 480, 485. Yeah, and that's really the project at hand. Next slide, please. I think that might be okay. Yeah, so this shows a better idea of the entire. So this is looking northerly, the entire project area here. So you can see we've got the existing condition as we've described, the existing riprap slope with the decrepit bulkhead down to the bottom left. That's where the steel H piles will be driven with the concrete panels kind of placed in between those, and the guardrail replaced up at the top on the western side of that roadway. The steel H piles will be driven either, they'll likely be vibrated. We're not anticipating to use an impact hammer as the primary means of driving. The impact hammer would only be utilized if necessary to drive through any kind of erratics or any like smaller stones that we hit as we're driving through. But more likely we would be employing a pneumatic vibratory hammer to install the H piles. The contractor would install H piles at low tide events. And that would be to eliminate any kind of disturbance or noise issues in the waterway itself. And we think that would address the fisheries issues or concerns with the project. Next slide, please. That might be. Yeah, so this is just more about the method of construction here. Stones are moved out of the way. There's no excavation. There's no significant excavation required to perform this. This is why we chose the H pile wall in the first place, rather than excavating and installing a cofferdam and putting any kind of precast or cast in place concrete seawall or anything where you'd have stone extending down below into the undisturbed waterway. We feel with this method, we can, just move some of the riprap out of the way, drive the piles, place the concrete panels, and build up from there. So it's really the method of construction. All the work will be performed from the land up on top of the roadway and from the adjacent slope. So no barges, no in-water work, and really just try to minimize any kind of disturbance during construction. And next slide, please. So this just shows us the proposed site plan. Again, about 485 feet. Really no new information here. The property lines are directly adjacent to the pier on either side. Those are surveyed property lines prepared by a PLS. Yeah, nothing groundbreaking here that we haven't covered. Next slide, please. And so the project lies within, as the chair has already summarized, land subject to coastal storm flowage, designated port area, land under ocean, rocky intertidal, coastal bank. It is technically a coastal bank, even though it has been armored previously. Within a fish mapped as a fish run, within waterfront area. I would just like to highlight that this is a designated port area. It's an industrial use area. And so we feel that with working low tides, again, that would, we feel that addresses any kind of comments or concerns that have coming from the fisheries folks. And I believe that is the end of the presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeremy. So a couple quick questions here before we go on. Do you have a oil spill prevention or a fluid prevention plan in place?
We require that for all of our projects. That's one of our, we have upfront submittals on all of our standard spec packages, and health and safety plan, contractors equipment list, contractors qualifications and certifications, and always a spill prevention plan as part of that. So that is part of our typical spec package.
Okay. What sort of machinery will you be storing landward?
We're probably just looking at an excavator and potentially a small crane, depending on what they actually want to, what they need to put the vibratory hammer on. So nothing more than that.
Okay. How long for construction?
For the piles, we're thinking about 20 days. We think 5 piles per day. There's about 100 piles to be driven. So we think probably 20 days for the piles. And then the land work, I figure they can probably do 50 feet a day, right? So that's, call it 8 days, I'd say 3 weeks of the actual slope work, maybe a little more, a month there. So overall, maybe 60 days of construction.
Okay.
A motivated contractor would complete it quicker though, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Have you assessed other areas of the pier as well?
This was all we had looked at. I didn't perform the inspection on this one myself. I know this area in particular was a concern of Wholesome, and so we really focused here. My understanding is that there's no other proposed work on the pier at this time.
Okay. Okay, before we go to commissioners, just want to remind members of the public to provide public comment, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag ConComHearing. Allison, did you have any comments here? Oh, and Jeremy, DMF did come in with requirements. One of them was using the slow start for the pile driving. And I assume that means vibratory jackhammering as well. So we would insert into, if we close the hearing, we would insert into the order of conditions the recommendations that we've gotten, or the comments from DMF. And I assume you've seen those.
Yes, and the slow start, no exceptions there. the time of year restriction and the silt curtains were the ones that we were hoping to not have included in the conditions and rather have a condition that all pile driving take place during low tide events, right? So we're not doing any pile driving in the water, and that avoids any of those concerns from DMF.
Yeah, we would have to go back to DMF to check with them. We generally, when we get conditions from DMF, we accept, we defer to their expertise. So we would have to check with them if that is something that you didn't want in the special conditions. Allison, what do you have?
I think you covered it, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, did you say that you're going to be putting those H piles and I assume lagging inside of the existing timber wall? Because I thought I heard you
Yes.
say it was outside.
No, landward. Yeah.
Landward.
Behind the wall. Yes.
Okay, and I thought it was strange in one of the cross sections you had on the proposed, it said the crushed stone depth varies, contracted to verify in fields. So what's he verifying? Are you trying to put 2 feet in there, 3 feet, or what's he looking at?
No, we just have to fill the voids that are there. It's just, it's already been subject to erosion, right? So there are some irregularities in that slope. And so that's all we're getting at there. It's just that crushed stone will be used to fill the voids that exist along that eroded slope already between the concrete panels that are placed and the existing bank to the proper top elevation, and then the riprap slope will be built from there. Yeah, that's all we meant by varies.
So basically, you're going to remove everything, put down some new geotextile, and then lay everything flat on that new geotextile after you fill in some voids?
Exactly, correct. Yeah, and we'll reuse, the plan is to reuse all the stone that's on site now, and then supplement as necessary just to get full coverage.
Yep. All right, that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Long?
Thank you, Chair. So I think one of the questions I had was around the low tide line here and whether the pile driving from the vibratory hammer would still have the potential to produce any silt or anything from the substrate going up into the water column, because all that, even if it's low tide, all that substrate is still connected. So I'd assume these are pretty significant vibrations. And if you do install a silt curtain, I would hope that would, solve any of those issues. But I wanted to ask you about that, Jeremy.
Do you work for DMF, Nick?
I do not. I'm the representative of the department.
Right. No, yeah, and DMF has similar concerns. And as Mr. Parker said, we would defer to them on that. And yeah, I mean, absolutely. If the work was happening in the water itself during then you would have some impacts, some siltation impacts. And so we have, when we are on sites like this where we're able to work the tides and work above that tide line, we've been able to avoid that siltation in the adjacent waterway. And we have had success with kind of avoiding time of year restrictions and siltation curtain requirements using that method, that construction method in the past. But on this project, I would prefer, it would be the client's preference to if possible, if this is the way the meeting goes, we prefer to close the hearing tonight with the DMF's requirements included in the special conditions.
And how did you determine there not being siltation when you're not operating in the water?
So because the siltation would, do you mean like because you have a certain area of influence from the actual H pile, right? So even if the tide line is 2 feet away, I think what you're getting at is you're still going to have a certain area of influence, and you'll still be having vibrations to a certain offset from that pile, which could cause that siltation. Yeah. No, that's a fair argument. You're right. That may be the case, and for that reason, we understand if a silt curtain is required.
And that concludes my question on that. The only other minor question is about the method of removal of the existing stone riprap. So, you know, there's a lot of wildlife that likes to live in there. So I was wondering, you know, if there's maybe perhaps not calling it a slow start, but how would you be starting to excavate the stone riprap from the existing?
Well, the excavator would just, I mean, they're not looking to, the idea is not to dig deep into the bank there at all. It's just to kind of scarify and move the riprap out of the way while they're doing the work itself. And so, I mean, as far as any like small critters or insects, or I guess there was no major consideration given to those. If there is, I'm not sure if the commission has imposed conditions that would, you know, I don't know, slow start, but I'm not exactly sure how you would address that. We could do a what am I getting at? Not vermin control. We could do some kind of like pest control sweep, you know, within a couple days prior to construction, and just make sure everything was kind of out of the way.
Yeah, and that's all fine. I think my main concern was you know, the excavation at low tide. So for any of the riprap that would be underwater during high tide, there not being excavation between there and low tide. But that concludes all my questioning.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Conan?
Thank you, Chair. Jeremy, did I hear that there will be no excavation, or there will be? I wasn't sure.
There will not be excavation.
Okay. How will you then determine the bottom section so you can install the geotextile, the permeable?
Well, the riprap the riprap that exists on the slope right now on the bank will be moved out of the way and to expose the bank itself. But so maybe I should clarify, there is no proposed excavation of the bank sediment, bank material itself. The riprap, the existing stone, we do intend to take off the slope in order to install the geotextile and you know, and start from a good base. But no excavation of the bank slope.
That makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that. So once the stones are removed, will there be any compacting or leveling or done?
No. We just put the geotextile down over bedding stone and then the riprap.
Do you have an assessment of the causes of the erosion that you find there now?
It's tidal flushing and precipitation events.
And what's the expectation of that continuing, and how long will this hold up?
So we're looking at probably a 15 to 20 year design life. You know, the storms are getting more frequent and bigger, and that's why we think going to a 1.5 to 1 slope rather than the 1 to 1 that we have now helps our design life here. And as far as loss of sediment from through the voids in the stone, that is the purpose of the geotextile. So we eliminate the erosion by the placement of that geotextile, and that allows, again, it's a permeable geotextile that's proposed. So it allows water infiltration and flushing without washout of the fine material.
So the water will go down the geotextile into the soil and out back into the harbor, but it won't take any sediment with it.
Won't take anything with it, right? Correct.
Great. Thank you. So the only other thing I was wondering about is the road itself is below the FEMA level. You said FEMA elevation. What was the elevation?
11. We're in an
11.
AE11. Yeah.
And it is below the 100-year flood level.
Correct. Yep. It's at 10.6. Above.
Okay.
Plus minus.
Is this going to provide any additional elevation to not allow water to get into the roadway at all by any chance?
Not to the roadway. No. This project does not propose a full reconstruction and raising of the roadway profile itself. This is really just focused on restoring the coastal protection on that bank. And so, no, that would be a much larger project, a much more in-depth. notice of
I
intent
understand this
that's have
work
in
is
front of you.
not on the roadway itself, but I thought maybe it's just the diagram and I'm misinterpreting the diagram. The way I see the stones laid out, it could provide a little bit of protection to the roadway, but that may just be the way the diagrams.
Oh, I see, because it has that little lip that goes
Yeah.
slightly over. That's just graphical, really.
Okay.
You know, you might have a little bit of that, but we're not, the intent was not to give any kind of, you know, to raise that profile at all. That was just, I see what you mean right there, though. That was just graphical.
Okay, great. Thank you. That helps. And what's a lagging wall? I just don't know what it is.
So it's H piles are driven, right? And then so once you have the H piles in the ground, top elevation to where you want it to be, then you've got flanges on either side, right? I guess you can't see my hands. You got flanges on either side, creating a pocket for you to insert precast concrete panels.
Mm-hmm.
And so that those the concrete panels are 1 foot thick, 5 foot wide, 5 feet deep. And so those are placed in between the flanges of the H piles, kind of all the way down.
Great. Thank you. That's all, Chair Parker.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
Yeah, I may have missed this. When I understood how long you thought the project would last, but when is it going to start?
We would like to start right away. There is a time of year restriction from DMF, and if the commission is not interested, if that will be required in the special conditions, then that time of year restriction ends June 30th, and so we would perform the work in July.
And then it would, if let's assume it starts in July, it would go, you think, for about 90 days?
No, I think 60 max, and I'm just giving a window that is. I mean, I certainly wouldn't expect it to take more than 60 days. You know, I think a motivated contractor would get it done in less than that. But for the sake of discussion, I would say 60 days of construction total. 20 days of pile driving, then you go place the panels, and then you do the earthwork and put in the guardrail. You know, 60 days of construction, I think.
Okay, and you may have said this and maybe I didn't hear it, but what arrangements or plans are there in the event of storms, or unexpected, whether they're tropical storms or whatever they are, during the point that you're constructing?
Right, yeah, and so similar to the spill prevention plan, that storm preparedness plan, sometimes contractors work it in with their health and safety plan, or sometimes it's a separate storm preparedness or storm contingency plan. But our group focuses on waterfront infrastructure maintenance and construction. And so we always, as part of our standard specifications, special provisions for the project, we always require a storm preparedness plan. And so usually what that involves is contractors' requirement to monitor and maintain communication of the extended forecast. And when they see those storms coming in, or maybe it's not even a storm, it's just a couple days of a bad wind direction or something that's going to get a storm, kind of a surge in there, they will take precautions to make sure that there's no damage, loss of material. They'll kind of close up shop, let the storm ride through, and then start work again. And so we are constantly checking, literally every morning for all the projects I have going on. I'm checking the weather and extended forecast and just making sure we're in a good place.
Okay, that's great. And who makes the decision about whether or not a predicted weather pattern, whether it's an actual storm or just, sort of wind and rain, is going to impact the project to close it down?
Well, so it is ultimately the contractor's decision, because that is typically part of their means and methods for doing the work. However, we stay involved with our projects through construction administration and on-site management, right? And so we we will advise heavily, especially if we think there is an issue, we'll advise strongly on what they might consider doing. It is ultimately their decision. But I will say contractors are often looking to get to avoid any kind of damages from storms, because they're out there to it hurts their bottom line if there's any kind of issues following a storm, loss of material, loss of equipment, if they have to get back in there, go and clean up. If anything enters the waterway, they have issues there. It's all on their responsibility. And so the contractors are, in my experience, they're used to this, and they're usually they usually make the call without us having to say anything.
But you do have the right to overrule them if you think that something is going to happen, which is going to have a bad impact, and they want to finish the job because they've got other things to do, or it's, for their bottom line or whatever it is.
Correct. So our approach there is we would start putting things in writing that would give them cause for concern, enough that they would, agree to make some changes, right? So again, it's not an overrule, but it's more, construction can get a little litigious, right? There's a lot of money at stake, and so if we start writing serial letters, to put them on notice, as they usually get the hint pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your answers.
Sure, you're welcome. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So Jeremy, I think that it sounded like your client's preference is to accept the DMF conditions, which are, I'll just quickly read them for the record. In-water silt producing work should be avoided during the fisheries time of year restriction from February 15th to June 30th to protect critical life stages of marine fisheries species. The use of bottom-weighted silt curtains around all areas of in-water silt producing work, and the use of bubble curtains to reduce sound pressure levels during pile driving at any time of the year, and a slow start be used for the pile driving to reduce turbidity and startle fish away from the site. We'd also like to see that storm preparedness document, report, or plan that you referenced in the file before construction. So I think we'd be getting that anyway, but we'll throw that in there also as a special condition.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing. I said, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. No problem. Anybody from the public, Allison?
I'm not seeing any hands raised and nothing in the email or Twitter, so no.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to continue the hearing with the 4 special conditions that I just read into the record.
Excuse me, did you say continue the hearing?
No, I said close the hearing. I thought I said close. I could have said continue, but I meant close if I did.
Yeah, you meant to close. Okay, if you're wanting a motion to close the hearing, I'm moving.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Conan?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is thank you. Next item on the agenda is notice of intent for DEP file number 0061917 and Boston file number 2023-009 from Griffin Engineering Group LLC on behalf of Webleyan's Development LLC for the proposed demolition of a 2-family residence and construction of a new multifamily residence, 6 units, with associated ground level parking, rear decks, utilities, stormwater management, and landscaping on 32 Orleans Street in East Boston. Resource areas land subject to coastal storm flowage. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
Good evening. This is Bob Griffin from Griffin Engineering. And before I get started, I just mentioned that my office is next to a commuter line, and with commuters coming and going, I might get interrupted by a train, but I'll mute my mic as soon as I can sense that train is coming by. So I apologize in advance for that.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Go ahead.
Do you have anyone else with you, or?
Yeah, the Mr. Sokol from Webleans is on the call somewhere. Oh, there's his hand raised, I see.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Okay, so who's doing the presentation, you or?
I will,
Mr.
and I'm
Sullivan?
ready to go. If we could go to the next slide, please.
Okay, one thing I would ask as we get going here that I see as a potential issue here is not proposing any landscaping on the site. I realize this is probably a very tight site as you go through this, but I'd like you, Mr. Sokol, to think about potential mitigation that you could offer if you can't do any landscaping or plant a tree or two. Whether that be light colored roofing materials, a rain barrel, or something else. So just want to plant that seed now before we get going. So floor is all yours.
Great, thank you very much. And it looks like the arrow in the description got shifted a little bit from where 32 Orleans Street is, but 32 Orleans Street is sort of between Sumner and Webster, a block down from Maverick. And this is about a 2,076 square foot site. So it's a very small site. It's about 800 feet from the water. It's at its closest point. The project has been through the Boston ZBA. A variance has been issued. It's been to the Transportation Department. A construction management plan has been approved, and it's been to the Boston Water and Sewer Commission for drainage and utility plans, which were approved, I think, last October. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is a picture of 32 Orleans Street, and the lot is fairly narrow. It's about 38 feet wide, and that extends from the brick building wall to the next building wall. So where the little minivan is parked, that's our vehicle. But that driveway is part of the locus for this project. The lot is about 55 feet deep. And you can just see in the picture to the left of the building, there's a recently constructed foundation. A sort of a similar design building has been approved and is under construction at 30 Orleans Street. The existing building is currently a two-family. The first floor elevation is about 19.9. And as I'll describe, we're going to raise the first floor up to about elevation 26. And we're going to try to get some garage space underneath that first floor as well. The grade of the sidewalk behind the van there is about 17. And I'm referring to Boston City base elevations here. The 100-year flood elevation is 16.5. I'll show you the flood map next, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So there's our 2,000 square foot lot, and the sort of orange area is the 500-foot. I'm sorry, the 500-year floodplain. The blue shaded area is the 100-year floodplain, and that's sort of checks out pretty well with the on-site surveying that has been done as well. The large box to the right of the building, as you're sort of looking at it from the street, is 245 Summer Street. So that's a pretty good sized building that we also saw in the photograph. And there again, here's our zone AE. So the base flood elevation is 10 feet on the NAD 88 datum. That's 16.5 on a Boston City base. So accounting for, I think, 50 years of sea level rise, that brings the base flood elevation up to 19.5. And then we add a foot of freeboard for the design flood elevation. That puts the design flood elevation for this site at 20.5. So that's about 3.5 feet above the sidewalk elevation that we saw in the last photograph there. And we can go to the next slide, please. This is the existing conditions plan prepared by Peter Nolan and Associates, and we're just going to zoom in on the area of interest. On the next slide, please. Didn't zoom in much, but okay. So the back corner of the lot is elevation 14.4. The sidewalk again is about 17, and that dotted line that cuts through the site is approximately the 100-year flood elevation. You can see the footprint of the two-family is shown in that plan, a little fence near the parking area just to the right of the building, and a single sort of driveway access point coming off of Orleans Street there. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is so this is the picture of the proposed building at 32 Orleans Street in the middle. To the left of it is the proposed or the recently started construction of 30 Orleans Street, and to the right is the existing building at 245 Summer Street. And you can see we've got space for garage underneath the building, 4 stories of living space, we can get 4 cars underneath the building as it's laid out by the architect. We'll go to the next slide, please. So this is the Boston Water and Sewer Plan that was prepared by Spruhan Engineering. And hopefully we can try zooming in on the next slide again, please. We go to the next one. Oh, that's better. Well, a little better. All right, so primarily what this plan shows is that the area behind the building has got a couple of infiltration chambers. So there's infiltration bed number 1 on the left and infiltration bed number 2 on the right. The infiltration beds have been set at pretty much the existing grades in the backyard. So there's very little topographical alteration going on in the backyard. The issue on the light for the landscaping is that the building to the right is right on the lot line. That's 245, and I think that's 4 or 5 stories tall. The building to the back is very tall. 30 Orleans Street under construction is going to be 4 or 5 stories tall. So there's going to be very little light getting into the backyard area. And so our landscape architect, Rebecca Bacan from RBLA Landscape Architects, wrote the commission a letter saying that she thought that we wouldn't get much growth back here. We have a potential interference with the infiltration systems, and as a consequence, she wasn't recommending new vegetation in that area. I think that what we could do, which would not affect the infiltration systems and might provide some, seasonal vegetation back there, is put some planters back there. So these would be above the crushed stone surface associated, with the infiltration systems, but it would still provide some, seasonal growth back there. There's not a whole lot of room back there anyways. It, might be used by, I suppose, somebody for, smoking a cigarette or something like that, but it's a pretty small area, again, about 200 to 300 square feet, and very shaded and sheltered. So that would be my thoughts in regards to adding some plants back there. I won't talk about the water and sewer connections, but since we're primarily here just for the land subject to coastal storm flowage, but all new services being brought into the building. And let's go to the next slide, please. So here's this is the resiliency diagram from the architect design resource team. And I think the cross section sort of tells the story pretty well. You can see there's a new garage with the 2 cars on the garage floor. That garage floor is elevation 17. That matches the sidewalk in front of the property. The first floor is elevation 26. So at that point, we're about 6 feet above the design flood elevation after considering the 50-year sea level rise, and that includes the 12 inches of freeboard. So you can see we're getting all of the habitable space well above the 100-year flood elevation, even after accounting for all of those things. All of the mechanical equipment is going to be at elevation 26 or higher. So certainly a very resilient building. The architectural plans call for flood vents being located around the perimeter of the building. I think there's 10 or 12 flood vents, and certainly much better than the existing building, which is, again, is the 2-family with a basement that goes down to, I think, elevation 11. Let's see, we can try the next slide, please. Geez, that zooming in didn't work. I'm really sorry for that. We tried to zoom in with those extra pictures, but for whatever reason, it got lost in translation. This is just simply an erosion control plan. We're going to tie our erosion control during construction into the adjacent buildings, and basically encircle the entire site perimeter with erosion controls. The contractor is also going to be responsible for maintaining silt sacks in the nearby catch basins and things like that. And with that, I'd be happy to address any questions.
Great, thank you. Before we get going here, I just want to remind members of the public to provide public comment. Please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag ConComHearing. Allison, do you have anything? Any comments?
So Chair, you already noted the landscape and plantings. The only thing I would add is just to confirm that while this project is not subject to the coastal flood resilience zoning overlay district, they have met those criteria, raising the residential units and critical systems above the design flood elevation.
Okay, and if you don't mind, just ask your reaction to Bob's suggestion about raised planter beds.
Their consideration is there, I would wonder, is there any space on the sidewalk? Has there been any conversations with Public Works around a potential for street trees? I know this neighborhood has fewer street trees than others, and I would inquire as to opportunities around the roof.
I'm not aware of any discussions for street trees. And again, because we have those two garage doors in front of our building, I don't know that we have a whole lot of room for a street tree, but we'd certainly be, happy to discuss that, at an appropriate time. And then the roof, we do have some roof decks, excuse me, and we could, again, put some planters up on the roof decks as well.
And then I defer to Commissioner Sullivan around whether the infiltration versus plantings challenges.
Great. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan, that's your cue.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, we don't want anything on those infiltration, any trees or anything built on top of them. That wouldn't work. Grass would be fine. As far as the street goes, though, it doesn't mean you need to put a tree in front of your garage door. You can, if you can put trees on a city street, you can put them down a little further. So if you work in conjunction with Public Works, there may be an opportunity in front of someone else's house that doesn't have a garage door there to do it, and also help the heat island effect. So that's something you should pursue with the Public Improvement Commission and the Public Works. I think that would be of value. Other than that, I don't have any questions on the presentation, except that that plan is more than 1 year old in the water and sewer. Just remind you, you need to have your engineer recertify that everything stays the same.
We did that last week. So.
Oh, okay. It's just, I just saw the number was old.
Yeah, I just had it redone. I noticed that prior to the meeting, and it's been recertified.
All right. No, and that's all I had for comments.
Great. Good. Thank you. Commissioner Long.
Yeah, so just, quick comments for the, street trees. It looks like they're in the public way across the street at 31 Orleans Street. There could be space for a tree pit there for your consideration. And I suppose recommendations I'd have for the landscape architect on any plantings, whether or not they're in, raised planters. There are, various native plants that do well in shade in various soil conditions. There's the marginal wood fern, and the plantain leaf sedge, both of which should be shallow rooted. But, I acknowledge Commissioner Sullivan's comments on anything growing on top of the infiltration chambers and, even limiting maintenance thereof. And that's all I got.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Conan.
Thank you, Chair Parker. Yeah, I echo the suggestions that have come up before. You can certainly plant a tree elsewhere if it is inconveniencing the garage door, given that the lot is narrow. And the rooftop, assuming that doesn't suffer from any shade, given the height of the building. So that certainly lends itself for any amount of plantation and any amount of vegetation, provided the soil weight and all of that is taken into consideration in the construction itself, and the roof can support that, and the water, any infiltration from the roof itself is managed properly. That will also help with the urban heat island effect, managing that from above. So those are a couple of thoughts, and I do, like Commissioner Long said, yes, there's plenty of species that do well in shaded conditions. It'd be nice to see some of those being used here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Richmond.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions about the garage. So in as it's presently designed, is it going to flood in the normal course of storms over there?
Well, at the present time, the 100-year flood elevation is 16.5. and the garage floor elevation is 17. So at the present time, in a 100-year flood, it would not flood. But accounting for the 3 feet of sea level rise and is what causes us to install flood vents around the perimeter of the building so that in the future, should sea levels rise and a flood occur, that the water would be able to come and go from the garage space without requiring any human intervention.
So do you know in any of the big storms we've had in the last 4 or 5 years, did that basement flood?
I can tell you it hasn't. We've owned the building several years.
And you're saying it has not flooded?
No, it has not.
Okay. And do you intend to tell is this a condominium or a rental unit?
Rental unit.
And do you intend to tell your renters that, their cars may or may not be safe in the event of a major storm?
Yeah, we can have that discussion with them. We can put something into the lease and inform
Yeah.
them.
And there won't be anything stored in that garage space at all, except for the automobiles, correct?
Just incidental
Yes.
storage.
That's
There's
correct.
no storage,
Bicycles, lawn chairs, things like that.
bicycles and lawn chairs,
Well,
anything else?
Yes. Again, items that would be incidental to a single family residential kind of use. So if it was me, I'd probably put a trash can down there. I'd probably put my bicycle down there. I might put some other sporting goods down there, but certainly nothing of, significant value.
Okay, but nothing that if it got wet and was swept away in some form, it's not going to do any damage.
Exactly, right.
Okay, all right. And the last thing I just wanted to confirm, I think I heard you say that all of the utilities for the building are at 26 feet or above. Is that correct?
All of the mechanical equipment is at 26 feet or above, but obviously there's some connection between the underground water and sewer pipes coming up and the electric, wires coming up into the building. So there'll be a chase that will allow that connection to occur, but all of the mechanical equipment will be at elevation 26 or higher.
Okay, so I'm not particularly worried about water and sewer, but can you tell me how the electrical wires are going to be? When you say a chase, what is it going to be made out of?
So typically these mechanical chases are made out of, the same materials as the building. So probably on the first floor, there'll be concrete or masonry walls. Up on the upper floors, there'll be all probably wood construction or metal studs or something like that. But there's usually a chase, 4 feet by 4 feet or something like that, that allows those utilities to get to the upper floors.
Okay, and at the garage and first floor level, what do you say the chase is going to be made out of?
I believe that they've got water resistant materials throughout the first floor, and then conventional, wood or metal construction materials above.
And the water resistant materials are what?
Well, I'm looking at the architect's plan now, and I can see that he's got a concrete perimeter around the entire building. And I can't tell from this drawing what the partition walls in the garage are made of, but presumably that, the architect has specified water resistant materials throughout the first floor garage space.
And when you say presumably, is that, I'm not looking at the plans, is that in the plans?
Yes, I just don't have the full plans in front of me. I have a diagram of the garage floor, and I can see the, openings for the flood vents, and I can see the concrete walls. But I don't have a full set of construction drawings at this point.
Okay.
But certainly the building is going to meet all the building code requirements.
Okay, and so I would just ask, Mr. Chair, that we verify that the materials that are going to enclose the electrical wires and the rest of them as they go up to the 26 feet level and then out throughout the building, but below the 26 feet level are water resistant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure that's any different than what the building code would require. Is that what you were saying, Bob?
Right.
Okay, well, I don't know, I
Yeah.
confess, I don't know the building code, but it seems to me that that's a pretty important consideration for wires, particularly electrical wires going upstairs.
Yeah, and I think it's I think you're covered in the building code. I'm very confident of that. That's a major concern as well. Okay. So with that, do we have anybody from the public?
Not seeing anyone now.
Okay, so with that, I would make a motion to close the hearing with the special condition that a landscaping plan be presented to staff for approval prior to construction. Goes without saying that the building needs to be constructed pursuant to the building code in effect at the time of construction. Do I have someone to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Conan?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That passes 5-0. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good night.
night.
Next item on the agenda is. Next item on the agenda is notice of intent for DEP file number 0061924 in Boston, file number 2023-011 from Niche Engineering on behalf of RREF 3420 Rutherford LLC, care of Related Beal Management for the proposed sidewalk replacement and limited excavations in the Rutherford Avenue roadway pavement of way adjacent to 420 Rutherford Avenue. Second one from Charlestown this evening. Resource area is land subject to coastal storm flowage. Who's here on behalf of the applicant? Is there anyone here on behalf of the applicant?
Deb, I think you're on mute. Sorry about that. So yes, I'm here. I'm Will Grosvenor with Related Beal, representing ownership. Deb Danick from Niche is also here.
Hi, team. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you, Will. Sorry about that. I could hear you all. I'm really sorry for that delay. My name's Deborah Danick. I'm with Niche Engineering, and I'm representing Will Grosvenor. Excuse me, I always say your last name wrong. From the developer. We are here to chat about our proposed work in land subject to coastal storm flowage within Rutherford Avenue. Would you like me to keep going?
Yeah, I just want to just flag something for you so you can focus on it during your, actually, why don't you just go ahead and we'll talk about it later.
Okay,
Please.
that'd be great. Thank you. So I just wanted to give this image just to kind of show where the project is. We are developing the site adjacent to Rutherford Avenue. The land subject to coastal storm flowage that you're seeing here from the Mystic River actually skirts pretty close along the property line, but stays within the Rutherford Avenue road right-of-way. If we go to the next slide, if you wouldn't mind, you can see some photos of the existing site. You can see on the left, there's the cement concrete sidewalk. The FEMA flood elevation of AE10, which is what our land subject to coastal storm flowage elevation is. That's on NAVD 88. Kind of skirts along the extent of that cement concrete sidewalk, which is in the Rutherford Avenue public way. On the left side of the plan, you can see that brick building with the windows. That is the existing building at 420 Rutherford Avenue. And we are proposing to demolish that building and build a new one. In order to do that work on the private site, which is not in the resource area, we actually have to cut into the Rutherford Avenue right-of-way into the asphalt roadway to do some utility connections and some utility disconnections, as well as replace the existing sidewalk that you see there that's in concrete. When you look at the actual plan on the right side, you can kind of see the blue line. That's the FEMA flood line for that AE10. And then you can see our red property line. So they're close to each other, but the work that we're proposing is all within the public way. So we also have signed on here as the owner, the city of Boston, because they have ownership of this roadway. The proposed work really consists of saw cutting the hard pavements, excavating, doing what we need to do underground, refilling those holes, and then replacing in kind the surface materials, especially in the asphalt roadway. We are proposing the same along the sidewalk. Currently, it's a cement concrete sidewalk about 10 feet wide with granite curb. We are proposing to replace it in kind because we've coordinated with the BPDA in the planning department they actually have some plans to redo the whole Rutherford Avenue corridor. So I'm going to take a couple minutes to kind of talk about that in our coordinated effort to do the work that we need to do here in order to basically a temporary condition until the city comes in and does their final work. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. These are some images from the Public Works Department plans for Rutherford Avenue. If you kind of look at the middle of the plan at the top where it says Hood Park, that circled yellow building with the white roof, that's our building at 420 Rutherford Avenue. So as you can see, they're proposing, and it's a little hard to see here. We'll go on the next slide in a second that has a cross section. This is perfect. The city is proposing to make this a more complete street. So right now, Rutherford Avenue is on our side. The view that you saw was only the southbound lanes, the lanes going into the city, which is 2 paved lanes wide and then very big wide the side parts. I forgot the name, sorry. I do a lot of walking. And then it's divided, and then there's the northbound lane. So they're looking at kind of a full redesign of this so that it can be more multimodal, which includes some bike lanes. So when you look at this same cross section, this is the typical cross section. When you look at the top, our site would still be on the top. And then as you look at the cross section, that's the same on the right side. So as you work your way kind of from left to right, the southbound lane, which is what we're on, the proposed future plans for our southbound side in order to make this cross section work, to have the number of car lanes that they need, the bicycle lanes, and then also the pedestrian sidewalks. They're actually proposing to have, the separated bike lane in the road and then just the sidewalk. And you can see actually, even in this image, they're proposing to have the trees at the back of sidewalk, which actually would be on the private site. So if we go to the next plan, you can see how our proposed site design plan, and by next plan, I mean next slide, please. You can see here, we're kind of the same view we were before with Rutherford Avenue on the right, and that's the southbound lane. You can see we are proposing to basically green and put in landscape and trees within our private property, knowing that there is not space in the sidewalk to meet the future plan. And that's really my presentation.
Okay, so Deb, quick question for you. So I happen to be a longtime resident of Charlestown. So the Rutherford Ave design has been proposed or, on the shelf for at least 20, 25 years. I was not aware. I mean, I know that it's gone back out for redesign. I've seen some preliminary narrative. When those figures that you have there, what are the dates on those? Because I'm looking at the March 2022 update, so that was a year ago. When did you get those? When were those generated?
You know what? We have those in-house, and I actually think they're older than that 2022 one.
Yeah. So I think they may be subject to change. I know that there's talk of bus lanes for the Silver Line and to accommodate a community shuttle. So that being said, I guess brings me to the major point here of I understand that it should be a temporary condition, but it could be a very long temporary condition. So, and maybe Allison will put a little bit more color to this, but we'd probably be looking for something, some sort of mitigation, maybe a bioswale or something regarding stormwater measures in the near term that would be beneficial in the near term. Because if we wait as long for the Rutherford Ave redesign as we have previously, it could be another couple decades. So with that, I think I would ask Allison if she has any other comments.
I think you covered that well, Chair Parker. The public, I believe, a member of the Planning and Development Agency is also on the call. He's welcome to add any detail on the timeline right now, if you'd like, Jim.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I'm Jim Fitzgerald. I'm Deputy Director of Transportation Planning with BPDA. I've been involved in the Rutherford Ave project almost for my whole time at BPDA for 18 years. So I understand the frustration with it not getting started yet. But I think as you gave an accurate overview of, we did have a 25% design. And at the time we were reviewing this project, we thought the project was going to go into construction this year. So I think working with this development team, we wisely thought it didn't make sense to plant trees in the public right away, considering the fact that the Rutherford Ave project was going to reconstruct the sidewalk. And I think to their credit, they agreed to put the trees they had been proposing along the curb onto their property, where I think they will be safer when Rutherford Ave does get reconstructed. The question of when it gets reconstructed, obviously that timeline has been delayed a couple years, but I also represent the city on the Boston MPO, which is providing the large amount of funding for the project. And right now we're hoping to, there will be, obviously it's not under construction today, so obviously it didn't meet the deadline of 2024 fiscal year. But I think we're hoping to get it, no less pushed out by 2 years at the max. And I think we're hoping to quickly make those design modifications that we're still working on. Obviously it's a BTD-led project, BTD Public Works project. I've been involved just because of my role and history, and so I'm intimately familiar with the project and the timeline. But I think the changes that will come are overall for the better, but I am hopeful that it's not another 20 years and maybe just a couple years. So I think that's why it's, in my opinion, at the time we were working with this team, like I said, we thought Rutherford was still on target for a sooner construction date. I just think that, having trees planted there that then need to get either relocated or removed with the Rutherford projects in a couple of years didn't make sense. So that's kind of how we landed on this current design. But I appreciate the fact they're in a safer spot now behind the back of sidewalk today.
Sure. And I appreciate that, Jim. And it's good to see you, and thank you for jumping on. I know you do a lot of night work as well, so I appreciate it.
No worries.
The bind that we're in to approve this project, and I think it's because it's a redevelopment project. I mean, we need to see some improvement. And I understand, and so how should I put it? In the NOI, the comment was, well, the improvements are going to come with the Rutherford Ave redesign. So I think that what you said about the proponent willing to make those alterations or to contribute to the infrastructure, I don't know if you have that in writing. If that's something that's solid, that might be a way of guaranteeing that we get something tangible that we have on the record so that we can make a decision here.
Yeah, Commissioner Parker, I hear you on wanting stormwater management now in the interim conditions. So I think that knowing that we have the trees at the back of the sidewalk, we could look to put in some pervious pavers at the back of curb in order to allow stormwater to hit the pavers, get into the ground and infiltrate in place. I think that would work better in this location versus a bioswale.
Fantastic. Yep, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So we can update, as we submit our final plans, we can update to show that work.
Yeah,
fantastic. Okay.
Just to add, Commissioner, I had talked to Chief Franklin Hodge, and I think, we think an interim solution like Deb just suggested would make sense. And again, not too costly to work around or reintegrate into the Rutherford project. So I just wanted to add that I had been talking with him as well.
Great, good, thank you. Before we go on, I just want to remind members of the public to provide public comment. Please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag ConComHearing. Allison, your reaction to the pervious pavers?
I think that's a great idea as a solution and would certainly contribute, as you said, to stormwater infiltration in the area. Thank you. That was
Okay,
all.
thank you. Thank you. Now we'll go to the real stormwater expert, Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, you took all my thunders. That wasn't fair. But I do think that, with the PIC and all that, there will be an agreement with the building. We'll take care of if you do permeable pavement to make sure you vacuum it, et cetera. That'll be a requirement of the improvements from PIC to do the upgrading of the sidewalk. Do you have to go to PIC for that, or are you going to use the existing right of way?
We are going to go to PIC for this work. We actually have some work on Bunker Hill Industrial Park, which is the street below. So
Yep.
we can add these pervious pavers to that work.
Yep.
In those.
All right, that's it. I'm
Great,
done.
thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Long?
Yeah, only thing, of course, being the parks representative, seeing any tree planting is wanting to know it's those trees that, any that are within the land subject to coastal storm flowage can handle saltwater inundation. So wanting to know about those species and, anything that's planted, and maybe this goes through PIC as well, wanting to know what the maintenance plan is for those trees, especially in the first 2 years.
Yeah, so the trees that we're proposing are all within the private site, so they're not subject to the PIC review or approval or maintenance requirements. And then they're also located adjacent to land subject to coastal storm flowage, but not in it. But obviously, understanding climate change, we will talk to our landscape architect to make sure that they've considered the species of those trees within the private site to make sure that they, are saltwater tolerant and understand what might be coming at them.
All right, yeah, and outside of our jurisdiction, so understand that consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, you're
That's
welcome.
it.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Conan?
Thank you, Chair Parker. Deb, would it be worth considering growing some of these plants within your space, as you said, but then when the sidewalk is ready to transplant them there, the trees?
For kind of the future plan of this roadway and the interim plan of this roadway, having the trees within kind of the concrete sidewalk, it doesn't really work for that plan. So that's why we're proposing to have them kind of as close as we can to the sidewalk within the private property.
I see. So Jim, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think knowing that we only have about a 10-foot dimension to work with, I think that the trees, I think, although I'm not an expert, would be better served in a vegetated, corridor along the back of sidewalk instead in this case, because we do have a lot of elements to fit into the Rutherford design.
And yeah, I want to reiterate what Commissioner Long said about the saltwater intrusion, and thanks for acknowledging that even if you are not right in the land subject to coastal storm flowage, you may see saltwater intrusion. And I was wondering about the pervious pavers. Is it simply that the gap between the pavers is the only place the water goes down, or the pavers themselves are truly pervious?
We would be proposing that the gaps between the pavers is pervious. The pavers themselves are not pervious.
Okay, and so the vacuuming would be for the gaps then?
Correct, yep.
What will be in those gaps? Was it gravel?
Yeah, it's usually like a pea stone, like a very fine gravel.
And when you're vacuuming, it's to make sure that no new gunk is just getting there, blocking the water, but you're not vacuuming the stone itself away, right?
Yeah, I mean, the realistic nature, this stone is so small that when you go to vacuum, it sucks out the stone too. So definitely, in some of the cracks, we'd have to fill in. But the intent is that basically the base below that stone would stay in place.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I had a question for Jim, if that's okay, Chair Parker.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So there is a large plan for the road, and I think I've seen that in Climate Ready Charlestown plan. And these properties and individual property plans come along as this one has done. Is the city well positioned to make full use of such opportunities and incorporating these smaller plans in the larger scope? I know it's a large question, but I'm curious.
Yeah, it's also a question that's, I didn't know you were going to go that far astray. So what I will do, to be fair to Jim, is give him the option to answer that question, but nothing will be held against you if you do not want to answer that question.
No, that's a fantastic question. So, the evolution of the design of the project, the current iteration had us, I know I'm going far afield too geographically, but us raising Main Street as part of it for resiliency, because that's a big inundation point over by the Schraff Center. And so that was an element that had been in the 25% design to help with that location specifically. But since then, there have been private developments over next to Schraff's that are proposing building a higher seawall instead. So I think if those projects are approved in advance, that would be, I think, a better solution than raising Main Street over by Schraff's, if you know what I'm talking about. A better, more permanent solution. So I think we will need to
We're talking about the
consider that element in our current redesign, as we talked about, that we're currently undergoing right now. So we may no longer need to do that if indeed that project is doing the seawall element instead. I think it's a better solution. So
well, thank you, Jim. I appreciate the response.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
Yeah, I have a question about whether or not the changes that are being suggested are simply ones that the staff can incorporate in their materials, or whether or not they are substantial enough that we ought to get a resubmission from this applicant.
No, I don't think so. I think the only thing so far is that pervious pavers are going to be installed. And so as far as the plans that are submitted prior to construction, that would we would require that it shows the location of the pavers and the operation and maintenance. Another thing, Deb, I mean, we typically ask for, if you have it, O&M for the pavers themselves, if you have some sort of manufacturer's specs or whatever, we've received that in the past.
Yep, we can add that to the O&M plan for the pavers as well.
Great.
So can I request that all of those things be included in some way in the materials as they are finally issued by the Conservation Commission?
Yeah, they would be submitted to staff prior to construction, so construction can't begin until those materials are in. Yes.
Is there anything that we've talked about that needs to be part of the order of conditions?
Only that.
Only that. Well, I would just make sure and want that to be included before I would support closing the hearing and not continuing it.
Yep. Anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you very
Sounds
much.
like no. Okay, great. Thank you. Anybody from the public, Allison?
No, seeing none.
Okay. So with that, I would entertain a motion to close the hearing with the condition that pervious pavers will be incorporated into the design depicted on a plan submitted to staff prior to construction, which would also include operation and maintenance techniques for the, for lack of a better term, cleaning of the pervious pavers or maintenance of the pervious pavers Do I have that motion?
So moved.
Please. Thank you.
Yes, second,
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Conan?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
aye.
And I vote aye, so that passes 5-0. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next item on the agenda is a request for a determination of applicability from AECom on behalf of the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation for the proposed regrade of an existing stormwater management swale located in Christian Herter Park adjacent to the Elliott Street in Brighton. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Tom Keogh from AECom. I'm here tonight on behalf of DCR, and I am joined by Thomas Volton and Rob Lowell of DCR.
Okay, so before we get going, Tom, a couple things I just want to give you in the interest of disclosure here. I think you're going to be swimming quite the uphill battle here to leave with a negative determination of applicability, and maybe I'll preview for you, at least in my mind, the issues that I've seen with this submittal. I don't believe that this fits under a minor exemption under the WPA. I also don't think that it, as you have articulated, I don't think it is a limited project. I don't believe it's a roadway. I think that roadway is that definition of a limited project for roadways is meant to apply to public roadways with motorized vehicles. With that, I would maybe you want to direct your arguments to why I'm wrong and why this is either enjoys a minor exemption or it is a limited project.
All right, well,
So with that, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It is an artificial water conveyance that takes water away from at this point, the bike path, which is a public way, paved surface. And it's strictly a maintenance activity of an existing stormwater BMP. As we all know, maintenance has to occur or else the BMPs will not function. Excuse me. So that was the thought behind saying that it is a limited project, because it's a water conveyance that takes stormwater flows from the paved bike path. The thought behind that, it's just a minor project modification. As I said before, it's an existing swale. It's only about 30 feet long. It's grassed now. It will be grassed when we're done, and the entire regrading of the swale will take less than a day. We're talking just hours of time to get this done. And once the grass starts growing again, people would be hard pressed to know that the project ever even occurred.
Yeah, I guess on that point, I don't think, the term minor doesn't necessarily apply to the, I don't know, for lack of a better term, de minimis nature of the work that's being done. It's more towards there's a minor, how should I say, scope of projects that enjoy that exemption. So I'll let you go on with your presentation, but I think, again, I'm still not convinced here. And I do think that the drainage structure maintenance that you're talking about for roadways has to do with road drainage, not a pedestrian path or not a path that doesn't allow motorized vehicles.
All right, understood. And that, that disagreement there, would not have an impact on whether you're saying that it's a subject to the Wetlands Protection Act in the local bylaw, which is the request for determination of applicability. We could just agree to disagree on the limited project provision and move on. It's not germane to the argument of whether or not the Wetlands Protection Act is applicable. So if we could have the next slide, please.
Sure.
All right, so as you can see, the project location here is immediately adjacent to the Elliott Bridge. It's within a grassed area of Christian Herder Park. It is partially located within the bordering land subject to flooding and the 25-foot riverfront area. You can see the riverfront area is defined by the thicker dashed black line, while bordering land subject to flooding is the blue shading. Next slide, please. This one here, a little tough here if we couldn't zoom in, but that's okay. I think I can describe it. The swale extends from the bike path. It's approximately 30 feet long and 4 feet wide. Periodic maintenance, has occurred. The area is mowed. It's overgrown now, and sediment has washed into it. The sediment has then become vegetated. So the swale no longer passes water from point A to point B at the same rate. Water will back up on the bike path and then flow via sheet flow across the grassy areas directly into the Charles River. Erosion controls would be established down gradient from all of the work. Work would then occur. It would all be weather dependent. DCR crews would take care of this work. So they would be in complete control of when folks go out there to get the work done. And if inclement weather is forecasted, they would just postpone the project. And the next slide, we do have a couple of photographs to give you an idea of what the area looks like. So in the photo to the left, you can see there's some higher grass over a couple of shrubs adjacent to the wall. And then as you start to move away from the wall, there's some higher grass there. That is where the swale has begun to fill in, and the vegetation's a bit higher. It doesn't allow the flow. And then the photo to the right is actually where the sheet flow would come around the swale and start pushing into the Charles River, and that is causing a little bit of erosion. And that, as I said before, it's a relatively simple project. So that is it in a nutshell.
Okay, so the work is being done within a riverfront area, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, any other resource areas?
It is bordering land subject to flooding, and given the current topography, we are going to end up with about a 59 cubic foot increase in storage for flood capacity.
Okay, and then maybe to get to the issue that you talked about before, how much work is being done? As I read through this NOI, it felt to me like, not NOI, this RDA application, it felt like there was a fair amount of work being done here. Can you talk about, what you're going to be doing in more detail?
Sure. It's first step, as always, establish erosion controls. Then you would come in with a small backhoe excavator, and you would begin to just working downstream by the river, draw back and regrade the swale. Like I said, it's 30 feet by 4 feet, so it's really 120 square feet of alteration. Given especially the projects the commission has seen tonight, I would not call 120 square feet of grading and revegetating a major effort. It's all likely to take place within a day.
Okay, so it's 120 square feet. Okay.
Total operation, yes.
Okay. Before we go on, let me remind members of the public, if the public wishes to provide public comment, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag ConComHearing. So Allison, what do you have on this? And as I've said, the review of to me, this application screamed out NOI to me, but I'm certainly open to other ideas here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that was certainly my first thought as well. I would be interested in a little more detail on the extent of grade change that's proposed, as well as, because it looks pretty shallow there. How much are we changing the grade? And then a few questions around the plantings and the plan there. Are you just reseeding? What is happening?
Yes, it would just be reseeding the area. We're not really changing the grade, the elevation as it meets the bike path, and the elevation as it meets the Charles River would not change. What we're doing is going into that swale and removing the material that has built up. So start to finish, point A to point B, the grades would remain the same. It would be, if you could go back to the photo, it would be consistent with the areas that are adjacent to the swale. So it would just be a little area right in there. It would not be a large cut within that area. It would just be removing the excess vegetation and sediment that has built up in the swale, and then revegetating that. So it will end up looking like the lawn in the photo to the left. It will look like the lawn area there with just a little dip as it makes its way towards the bridge.
Okay, I would be curious about Commissioner Sullivan's thoughts. I'm guessing that's where you were going, Chair.
Yes. Yeah, and again, I mean, to issue negative determinations of applicability, we have to be really careful. So that's why we're questioning you so arduously here. Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, so one of the things I really enjoy is that people maintain things they build and don't let them get out of control. And I always like to encourage people to do it. And this to me truly looks like a simple maintenance project that maybe has been delayed a little too long. And with the proper controls, and that is making sure we don't have any sediment runoff in between when they reseed, et cetera. It seems to me we could just get them permission to get out there and do this thing and make it work. But we would definitely have to have staff or somebody oversee it. And I only say that because we have had less than excellent opportunities for DCR to show us how good they are all along the river. We're always battling back and forth. But to me, this is a very straightforward project. I would always encourage people to get maintenance and to work with staff to oversee it. So I am not of the NOI team.
Okay. Okay. And I'm glad you brought up the point about DCR. We did have the issue over at the playground a few years back where the contractors went over the path into the river, into the bank of the river and had completely rutted up that area where I think Nick and I think it was Amelia at the time had to go out and get that all fixed. So, our previous experience with work this close to the riverfront also makes us very cautious. That being said, one thing I wanted to point out to you, Tom, that I forgot about is I think that when you defined or delineated the 25-foot waterfront area, I think you did that incorrectly. I think you said it was 25 feet from the bank. It would be actually 25 feet from the end of the 25-foot riverfront area, because the 25-foot riverfront area in Boston is considered a resource area, and the definition of the sorry, phones just went out. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, and
thank you. And the definition of waterfront area in the ordinance itself carves out the waterfront area is 25 feet from the riverfront area. That's right definition. So that would need to be corrected because we don't want any precedent in any of our submittals misstating that.
By all means, I did misunderstand that. You're correct.
Yeah, it's a common error. Commissioner Long?
Yeah, hi, Tom. So I might have heard you incorrectly, but did you say a few minutes ago that regrading would not be part of this project?
Well, the grade changes would not, from right now, the entire area slopes very gently from the bike path to the river. We would not change that. We would just remove the sediment that has built up in the swale. And we're basically smoothing out the swale in that 30 by 4 foot area. So it's not going to be a large cut that suddenly enters the river a few feet below where it enters the river now. And it's not going to drop off the bike path, a foot below where it does now. The points A to B are going to stay the same. And we're just going to basically remove the buildup sediment in there and smooth it out.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that clarifies it. And I guess, thinking about reseeding here, I'm just curious to know, what monitoring or inspection, might be entailed after the reseeding. Just looking at the overgrowth that occurred here, I understand, mowing can't always happen for whatever reasons. But I saw that you're proposing a New England wetland plant seed mix. That sounds excellent, but we want to see it succeed too. So curious about that monitoring early on.
It would occur, we would look to get the work done at the beginning of the growing season, the same as you would if you were looking to plant some grass at home, to take advantage of the weather and rather than having to go out there and water. The erosion controls wouldn't be removed until the grass seed has germinated and taken hold. If for some reason that didn't happen or there are bare spots, those areas would be reseeded, and it would be continual maintenance of that until we know we can remove the erosion control safely without having a possible sediment event within the river. The DCR staff could take care of that on a weekly basis.
And I imagine, sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh no, and the typical maintenance of it, the area would just be mowed, and that would be on the current DCR mowing schedule.
Got it. Thank you. Sorry, catching up here. I think that was it for me. Yeah, appreciate it, Tom.
Great. And I understand Commissioner Sullivan's concern about having oversight, and I also understand that the Environment Office is a bit understaffed at the moment. So I could offer that, somebody from AECom as being a third party could go out and observe and photo document the work as it's going on, and then submit a report to the commission.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but reseeding for that seed to succeed, you're probably looking mid-April, right?
Yes, we'd love to do it when it's just raining, several times a week.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Great. And to that point, Tom, I think that given the proximity to the bank, to the river, I think I'm starting to turn around on whether this requires an NOI or not, but we need some clear conditions. So I think we're going to need some time to work on conditioning this work. That's going to be, and I don't think we're going to do all of that tonight. So I think that's something that, as you said, that'll be consultation with staff as to, the conditions for this work and things like the oversight that you just mentioned, because we definitely want all of that in the record. Commissioner Conning?
Thank you, Chair Parker. Tom, so in this area, there's additional sediment to be removed and vegetation to be removed as well. Is that correct?
The existing grass that you could see in the photograph to the left, that would be removed, yes.
And also sediment?
Right, that is it. So there was a swale that over time and over the years have gone by has filled with sediment. That sediment has vegetated, and that's what you're looking at now. So that was not the established lawn, the established swale. It is filled in with sediment, and the sediment is now growing grass and other weeds. So the
And when you're
sediment
looking to remove the
will
grass,
continue to be removed.
sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Tom, were you saying something?
No, I was not.
Okay, so when you remove the grass, you're also going to remove the sediment with it, right? Is that?
Yes, that is correct. We're going to dig down, you know, I think it was approximately 10 inches within the swale.
I see. So that's a lot of sediment. Where did it come from?
Just years and years of washing off the bike path and other adjacent areas.
I'm just wondering if the addition of sediment here means that the subtraction of sediment elsewhere, and given that we're talking about just maintenance here in the spirit of Commissioner Sullivan's comments about doing regular maintenance, where else is there a problem that if left alone will continue this and will probably do this again in a few years?
Well, this took more than a few years to occur.
I
So
see.
it's not as if, you know, somebody sanded a parking lot well up gradient from this and it eventually made its way here, you know, over the past year or so. It's filled in over quite a period of time. And if it was, you are a little more forthright with the maintenance, and you don't even need to come out there every month to rake the area out or anything like that, but you know, you mow it and you rake it on, you know, once you're done mowing, because that could also be an issue, is that, you know, grass clippings and everything else build up in it after you mow it. You know, so with proper maintenance, you can prevent it from happening if the maintenance, you know, even occurs once every 2 years.
And I guess I'm also hearing there's no concern about where the sediment is being lost from.
No, no, it's such an insignificant, you know, amount that I think if we just go back to the air photo that was on the first page, right? I mean, it's a tiny swale in the middle of a park. So it's, you know, we're not down gradient from a bank or anything like that that's eroding during a storm event. Or, you know, there are no sinkholes in the roadway that are washing away that are causing this.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
In terms of the New England wetland vegetation that you're going to seed there, will that be different from what's growing all around? And will the maintenance plan have to be different and be sensitive to that?
It will be a little different from what's adjacent to it. You know, what's adjacent to it is numerous types of grass that are common to New England, and a lot of weeds, you know, that just typically grow in areas that aren't, you know, fertilized, or, you know, you're coming out with your weed killer and your weed preventer and things like that. So you have, like what was depicted in the photos that we were showing, there are numerous species out there. And the same within our New England erosion control and restoration mix. It's specifically for detention basins and moist sites. It's meant to be mowed on a regular basis.
And,
you know,
and
there
in
are
a style that's no different from elsewhere.
Right. Right now, you know, when it's mowed, it's just going to look, it's going to look like a lawn. The differences with the New England wetland plant seed mix, they are, you know, typically very fast to germinate.
Will they also spread to beyond the area where you're seeding them?
There's a potential for, you know, there are no invasive plants in there, and it's all native to New England.
Right.
You know, there is a chance that some of the vegetation could move laterally.
Mhm.
You know, the same way that there's a chance that the grass within the park right now could move into the swale.
Right. And if it did, it wouldn't be a bad thing, right?
No, it would not, as long as it's mowed and the area is raked out. that shouldn't be a problem.
Great.
You know, we chose that detention basin mix because it germinates and stabilizes the soil very quickly.
Right. Great. Sounds great. Thank you. Thanks, Chair Parker.
Thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
Yeah, I mean, my problem as I listen to this is a feeling that if we make this negative determination, that there's no way to control that what has evidently happened here doesn't happen again. What I mean by that is, you know, you're describing a state agency that is short-staffed and hasn't done what it needed to do, and now you're coming to us to say, well, we don't need to do an NOI, but you know, here's what we're going to do to fix this and maintain it. And unless there's something, and I'm echoing here, I think what the chairman has just said, but unless there's something in the negative determination of applicability that puts the burden and the responsibility on DCR to maintain this and do all the things that you have said during this presentation. And I am not suggesting you are acting in anything other than good faith, but you know, I think our experience and the experience certainly even on this one little spot is that, you know, if we don't have the NOI, it's much harder for us, for the Boston Conservation Commission, the city of Boston, to make sure these things happen. So, you know, I think my inclination, and I don't know that this is going to be liked by the chair, but I think my inclination on this is to continue this so that we get an opportunity to work on the language and come back with something which is going to put the responsibility, the burden long-term on DCR to maintain this in an appropriate way.
Well, I mean, that is understood, and I agree. You know, and it's not as if we're here saying that once we do this and we just mow and rake it, we'll never be back. You know, 20, 25 years from now, the swale may need to be regraded again. That happens when you use natural BMPs to control stormwater. You know, infiltration trenches and the like, they all require periodic maintenance, and then a larger maintenance events where you basically got to turn the hands of the clock back and kind of start over. And that would happen, you know, 20, 25 years from now. In regard to the continual maintenance, you know, this has been going on out here for decades with this, you know, with the swale. But 20 years ago, DCR didn't have, you know, a stormwater group or an O&M with the MS4 that pertained to the MS4 permits that required them to conduct all of this maintenance in order to stay in compliance with their MS4 permit. Now DCR has that. They're constantly making upgrades to remain in compliance with their MS4 permit. You know, they adhere to the O&M plans. So it's a different world than it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the last time anyone went out and, you know, worked on this swale.
Well, I mean, that I think is nothing but good news, all of that. But as I said, going forward, you know, I'm going to feel like I'm going to be very supportive of the negative determination if there are ways to ensure that this, you know, that the routine maintenance that you've mentioned and that Commissioner Sullivan has mentioned occurs. And so I don't know that, I mean, I've said it and I don't need to repeat it, but I'm waiting to hear what our chair says. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's very prescient. I am going to ask for a motion to continue this so that we have an opportunity to trade back an order, not an order of conditions, I'm sorry, conditions for a negative RDA, because this clearly won't I guess, pass the test with just the standard erosion control conditions that we usually put on these projects. With that, Allison, anybody from the public interested in this hearing?
I'm seeing none, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I would entertain a motion to continue the hearing to develop a set of conditions for the work that's being proposed.
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have? Okay. Kat, did you catch that? Who moved and who seconded?
I heard a motion from Alice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
and
true.
who's okay? Do we have a second?
I can second.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Commissioner Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Long.
Aye.
Commissioner Conan.
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Great. Thank you. Okay. Next item on the agenda is a request for determination of applicability from Epsilon Associates, Inc. on behalf of Channelside Acquisitions, LLC for exploratory soil borings at 244 to 284 A Street in South Boston. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
Thank you, Chair Parker and commission members. I'm Eric Rexford from Epsilon Associates, here on behalf of the proponent and landowner, Channelside Acquisitions, who's represented tonight by Olivia Sherry. Olivia and I are joined by Mike Atwood from Haley and Aldrich, who's providing engineering services for the proposed work. I know you're all familiar with this site. I'll give you a quick overview. It's located in the Fort Point neighborhood of South Boston, adjacent to the Fort Point Channel. It's generally bound by Necco Street to the north, A Street to the east, and Binford Street and the Gillette campus to the south. Next slide, please, Allison, if you will. The site currently operates as a surface parking lot. It's nearly entirely paved, and there's a short segment of harbor walk along the edge of the channel. Next slide, please. Resource areas on the project site are shown on the figure. These include Coastal Bank, which in this instance is the CES, that's the granite block seawall at the face of the channel, and its associated 100-foot buffer zone. Under the ordinance, there's also the 25-foot waterfront area, and the entire site is located within the 100-year floodplain. So it is land subject to coastal storm flowage. Next slide, please, Allison. This is just the flood insurance rate map used to delineate the extent of land subject to coastal storm flowage. Next slide. You may recall we were before the commission some months ago for site investigation work consisting also of borings, for which the commission issued a negative determination. The newly proposed borings are a continuation of that same work, and the applicant is again respectfully requesting a negative determination to advance 4 additional borings within land subject to coastal storm flowage. No work beyond these borings is proposed at this time. On the screen circled in yellow, that's the approximate location of the boring. So at the far landward edge of the site near the intersection of A Street and Binford Street. Next slide, please. Just a photo of the parking lot in the approximate location of the borings. Again, it's asphalt surface through which the borings will be advanced. Next slide, please. I believe this is the site plan. Yep, showing the precise location of the 4 borings. These borings will be approximately 2 inches in diameter, and they'll be advanced no deeper than about 10 feet below grade. And this will be done using a direct push rig. Once sampling is complete, the borehole will be backfilled and covered with an asphalt patch. And we anticipate the work will be completed within about a week. With that, I would turn it back over to the commission. We'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Great, thank you. And, you know, I hate to say this to you, Eric, but I think you came in on, according to our notes, July 7th of 2021. So
More than a few
Time-
months.
more
Wow.
than a few months. Yes, yes, time
The,
flies. So, but it does look very familiar. I just want to remind members of the public to provide public comment. Please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @Boston Enviro and using the hashtag #ConcomHearing. Allison, do you have anything on this?
No, just to note the prior negative determination that was issued and suggest the mirror conditions, special conditions from that prior
-2 and
determination.
-3. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Yeah. What are you doing that requires 4 borings that close?
I'm gonna turn that over to Mike. If you're still on, Mike, maybe you can provide some specifics on that.
Sure, Commissioner Sullivan, there, as Eric said, they're only going to be advanced about 10 feet. The site that we're going to be putting these 4 borings on, we're in a location where there was a former gas station historically, and they're environmental related.
Oh, okay. All right, that's fine. I just couldn't possibly understand why you do that many that close. Oh, good. Good luck getting all that nice oily gravel taken out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, they might need some luck. I know it's near the property line too, so. Commissioner Long?
I have nothing on this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Conan?
I was also just curious, so there was a gas station there, and the boring is to understand the nature of the contamination of the soil, is it? Or
That's
what?
correct, Commissioner.
Okay, and you're planning to take that soil out?
Actually, these particular borings are to sample the vapor below the pavement.
The vapor, you said?
Yeah, soil gas.
I see. Okay, so what gave you the suspicion that there is still, I mean, it probably is, but was there something that led to this?
Just over the course of the years of doing the investigations out there, you do a few borings, and then, as Eric said, we've been here in front of you before, and you collect information, and sometimes that leads to needing to collect some more information.
I see. So this could continue beyond these borings.
We would hope not. We would hope that we'd be in a position to not have to do any more.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
I don't have any. Did anybody from the public raise their hand?
No.
No. Okay, thank you. So with that, I would entertain a motion to issue a negative determination of applicability 1 and 2 with the same conditions issued for the previous.
2 and 3,
RDA.
Chair, or 1
I
and
am so sorry. I am so sorry. I must be getting punchy. 2 and 3.
So moved.
Okay. Do we have a second? Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Conan?
I'm gonna say aye, but I'm curious to know if it's, whatever the findings are, if we can learn about the findings.
Yeah, they're going to be public.
Okay, great,
It'd
thank
be
you.
very easy to find those. Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you. Okay. Next item is a request for an amendment to the original order of conditions for DEP file number 0061789 and Boston file number 2021-023 from Ty and Bond on behalf of NStar Electric, DBA Eversource Energy for the proposed tree clearing located along the private right-of-way, Springfield Street, 31 Springdale Street and 141 Savin Hill Avenue in South Boston. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
I'm Tracy Adamski with Ty and Bond. And I'm joined today by a few folks from Eversource, Chris Newhall, Meredith Burek, and Jason Wright.
Okay, before we get going, Allison, do you have any context on this that you wanted to share?
Sure, Chair. Apologies for the dog. Actually, why don't we let Tracy go ahead and then I will jump in at the end.
Okay.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's a very short presentation. This is a request for an amended order of conditions for the order of conditions that was issued for the Andrew Square to Dewar Street Reliability Project. This project is currently under construction, and this request is specific to work at Springdale Street, which is just on the other side of I-93 and MBTA, across from the Dewar Street substation that's shown on the map here on the right-hand side. So if you can go to the next slide. Excuse me. So we're, excuse me. The proposal that's in front of you is for tree clearing within land subject to coastal storm flowage. The line that's, the plan that's shown in front of you, the dark gray line that kind of squiggles across the page is the limit of land subject to coastal storm flowage. The dashed line that comes over and follows along just to the, I'll say plan south of the land subject to coastal storm flowage is the proposed transmission line, electric transmission line. That line hasn't changed, but what we've, as the contractors come on board and has looked at constructability, we're identifying that we need to remove some trees located within the limits of the resource area. So on the left-hand side of the plan, there is a box that is a required jacking pit for the transmission line to come under routes 3 and 93 as well as MBTA. And then there's a lighter line box around that, and that is a clear zone that the contractor needs for to have a safe working environment. And then what we've identified here in with the red highlights are the trees that are proposed to be removed within the resource area. So there are 16 trees total. And again, this is the work zone that was previously approved. And then if we go to the next slide, these are a listing of all those trees within the resource area. So as you can see, the majority of them are invasive trees, black locust and Norway maple. And so 13 of the trees that are proposed to be removed are invasive. And there's some that are, smaller diameter trees as well. And there are 3 native that are in this area. And if you go to the next slide, you can forward to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we're working with parks on proposed mitigation, and we do plan to replant the area with native species, including red maple, scarlet oak, sweet gum, pin oak, eastern red cedar, and arborvitae and viburnum. So there'll be a mixed species here, both some tree species as well as some lower growing shrub species, as well as a payment to the tree fund. So that wraps up our presentation, and I guess we'll open it up for questions. And we have been working with Park on that mitigation plan.
Yep, and I guess you've had some community meetings, and maybe I'll let Allison talk to that. Before we go to that, I just want to remind members of the public to provide public comment. Please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag ConcomHearing. Allison, what do you have to report on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So Tracy, could you clarify for us the final number of trees that are proposed to be planted with the Parks Department for replacement? Do you have that?
Yes.
Okay, well, as you look that up, I'll just confirm what Tracy said, that there was a public meeting held last evening to discuss this plan with the Parks Department, and the combination of trees proposed as well as park improvements and contributions to the tree fund was broadly acceptable to the Parks Department, but we would love to get that confirmation of that final number.
So the current.
I was going to say, sorry, Tracy, if you were having trouble finding that, but this is Chris Newhall with Eversource Energy. And the final number is 17 trees that when they're planted, those are going to be a 2 to 3 inch caliper size. Obviously, they'll grow with time. And then 92 shrubs. So that's the total number of replanting that will be, I guess, reinstalled to mitigate for the trees lost. And then, as Tracy mentioned, the payment to the tree fund for on an inch by inch basis for the number of trees that ultimately get removed.
Thank you, Chris, and obviously defer to Commissioner Long on this front as well.
Yeah, great.
And I'll just add that of those shrubs, there are 8 red cedar and 7 arborvitae. So, you know, those could be considered low growing trees as well.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Allison. So Commissioner Long, I'm going to put you on the spot in your first hearing. Why don't you go next if you know anything about this issue?
So, you know, it sounds like, you know, they've been communicating with the Parks Department, and you know, I don't know who they've been talking to at Parks, because I've only interfaced with this project through this hearing. So I'm you know, really just curious, Chris or Tracy, who at Parks you interfaced with. And I know you had a public meeting as well. So it sounds like you have, you know, bases covered from the Parks perspective.
Right.
Yes.
And I know that we've been speaking with Commissioner Woods, and then Kathy Baker,
Eclipse.
Eclipse, exactly. And I know that Jason Wright with our Community Relations Department is on. I don't know if he's had any other additional correspondence with other members of the Parks Department.
Okay, great. And, you know, I wanted to note just for the record, you know, it sounds like you got approval for this tree from Parks, but I believe the arborvitae is non-native. It's not invasive, it's just not a native tree. I know that's good for screening though, so that's probably why you chose it.
Yeah, exactly. We did hear from some of the neighborhood outreach that we've done in addition to talking with Parks, that obviously screening of I-93, you know, just not only for visual, but also for noise, you know, attenuation and things like that were a primary concern. And so while obviously a focus is to bring in a native species that would, I guess, more similarly replicate a natural community, you know, screening was a very top of mind issue here for this planting plan.
That's understood. Appreciated too. I think that, I mean, that really covers it, because, you know, I don't really need to be too redundant, you know, given you've talked so much with Parks at this public meeting.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, just 2 quick comments. I noticed you're jacking that underneath the expressway and all. I just want to remind you, when you go under that water and sewer pipe, that's inside a 72-inch sleeve. So make sure you're nice and deep, or you get a lot of free sewage. The other comment I had is, I assume when you replant these, you will be in the same, I guess the word might be tree line. You're not coming out into the area where both yourselves and ourselves exist. So all the plantings will be upland of that.
Yeah, that's correct. We've got a a 10-foot offset from our line that we do need to keep free of trees, just so that, you know, tree roots and tree throws potentially don't, you know, cause any safety concerns with, you know, disrupting the line or potentially exposing it, you know, without disrupting it. So that is what we do plan to do. So there is an existing, I think it's might be a 6-foot tall black chain link fence there that's there now at the kind of the tree line. As we push this back and clear out some of these trees to keep that 10-foot offset free of trees, we're going to be moving that fence back that 10-foot distance as well. That will allow us free and clear access to our line in case of any emergencies, and obviously the same for any of the other utilities that are placed within Springdale Street.
Yep. All right. That's all I had.
And for the jacking pit, that was a primary concern of ours. We actually had to modify the location of the jacking pit and move it back into the tree line. That was a request that we received administrative approval on, I think, last year from Mr. Moreno when he was employed with the city. And that was, again, so that we could offset and get deeper to avoid that sewage line.
All set.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Conan?
Thank you, Chair Parker. That offer of free sewage from Commissioner Sullivan, and I don't know why you would pass that up. But is this an abundance of caution scenario that the tree should be 10 feet away from the pipeline? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it is. You know, with an electrical line, there is heat loading that we need to be concerned about. And if we are in a situation where abundant vegetation is removing a soil moisture content to the point that, you know, it could be extremely dry, that's an issue because it just does not allow for heat transfer, you know, to the soil, so that, you know, we could potentially experience an issue. But again, it's an abundance of caution thing. We just don't want to have conditions arise that can alter sort of some of the engineering design that is incorporated into a design of a facility like this.
I see. So there's insulation around the cable though, right?
Correct. Yes, it's a fully insulated cable. It's housed within a duct that is further housed within a concrete encased duct bank. And all of that, again, has, you know, very static engineering properties that are relied upon for those heat loading scenarios. But then for the soil that's surrounding it, I guess the intent here is to make sure that does try to maintain a typical condition for those heat loading concerns, but also, again, it's more of a physical safety concern as well, just so that we don't have any tree roots that would somehow entangle around the duct bank and either disrupt the line, or again, through a tree throw situation from wind, would potentially expose the line to you know, anybody who might be passing by, or you know, anything like that.
So we're talking about a tree root disrupting the line by breaking it, or a windstorm leading to the tree falling and disrupting the pipeline because the root could be moving the pipe.
Yes, obviously for a small tree, you know, that concern's very minimal, but as trees grow with time and tree roots continue to, you know, obviously grow into the soil, you know, those could be concerns. And again, this is certainly an abundance of caution type of a situation. The 10-foot offset to either side of the line also does allow us to have free and clear access in case of any other type of emergency, which we would need to access the line and excavate on it. We wouldn't need to bring in tree clearing crews and, you know, remove stumps and things like that.
Thank you. The point about invasive trees is well taken, but, you know, even invasive trees have a lot of benefits in terms of supporting the biodiversity, as well as avoiding soil erosion and carbon sequestration and things like that. And the replacement trees are going to be small, I assume, and will take a couple of decades before they can have the same kind of impact. this is a large entity we're talking about with Eversource. Is there any way you could consider having like a tree nursery somewhere where you can bring in more kind of viable grown trees to plant as replacement for the trees you're going to take out?
You know, I am not a landscape architect, so I guess I can't comment on, you know, the size in you know, typical quantities that are available for large, say, mature trees. I think we also get into a situation where, you know, planting large mature trees you know, is a difficult thing. It takes specialized equipment. This site is on a hillside as well. We do know that there's ledge nearby or shortly, you know, or within a short distance under the soil surface. So planting of smaller trees, I guess, will allow us to, you know, install those trees within a, you know, a suitable medium where they can kind of grow, and those roots will be able to space out within whatever soil depth is available. Whereas if we needed to bring in a large diameter 12-inch, 10-inch, you know, caliper tree, that might be something that requires a 3-4+ foot depth of excavation to allow for a suitable you know, planting zone for that. So you know, I think our proposal here for 2 to 3 inch caliper trees, while I certainly understand the concern for a temporal change, will ultimately allow for you know, shade in this area, and again, wildlife habitat, biodiversity as well. And you know, certainly understand that there's some concern there. We are also paying into the tree fund as well as replanting, which, you know, is a bit of a double benefit to the city and to the parks department.
Appreciate all that. I mean, just trying to mitigate in the area where you're taking the nature away. I wasn't suggesting we should bring a giant sequoia tree there. It's just there's probably something between the 2 and 3 caliper and 10 and 15. So something to think about. But, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Raceway.
Yeah, I guess my question is, how come at the original proposal for this work, was it not anticipated that this number of trees would have to be removed?
You know, I think we initially had anticipated being able to install within the road, the existing kind of cleared area for the roadway layout. And then, you know, once we had a contractor on board and looking at the location where the actual duck bank needs to be installed, and understanding that that's at the base of a slope coming down from the area to the north, you know, those discussions quickly turned into, you're going to need to clear some of this out so that we can have a stable slope, and you know, we may have to grade this back somewhat so that we don't have, you know, essentially soil and other materials more or less falling into the excavation. You know, you're going to need to have obviously an excavator that excavates that. An excavator is, you know, at least probably about 12 feet wide. So from a duck bank that's approximately 3 feet wide, you know, you can put say, you know, at least 6 foot area or so, you know, to one side of that. So that would quickly get into this area that we're proposing to take these trees down. You know, so I think it's a function of you know, engineers and permitting specialists looking at something, I think, a bit more in 2D, you know, putting that on drawings versus a contractor that gets, you know, hired and starts looking at the job and saying, that's not going to work, or it's not going to work exactly how you think it will. So I think that's really where, you know, this miscommunication occurred.
So I mean, this is not your company's first rodeo. And so it bothers me a great deal, the number of trees that you claim need to be taken out. And not anything of, and I appreciate what you've said, but not anything of what you said doesn't seem to me to be the word that I'm thinking about is foreseeable. I mean, you get experts looking at that, and I guess my feeling is that, you get the permission to do it. You don't, and I don't mean you personally, but that it is not paid attention to the issues of the trees and how big they are and whether they're going to have to. I mean, none of this is rocket science. And I just think that coming back again and saying, okay, so we're going to take down 16 trees. And yes, some of them are big and some of them are invasive, but as Conan points out, they still have benefit. And now you're going to essentially denude the area. And the other question that I had, and nobody has addressed, I don't think, and maybe I missed it, is, what if these new trees don't take? I mean, what obligations are there for Eversource or whomever to water these trees to make sure they thrive? I think that giving to the tree fund is great, but the tree fund and the Department of Public Works and the Parks Department in Boston are not responsible for maintaining these trees. And so if I'm going to vote for this, and I haven't decided yet if I am going to, I want to hear what the maintenance plan is, and that's A, and B, whether or not you can kind of go back and decide that you don't need to take out 16 trees, that maybe you could take out 11 or 12.
Okay. So Allison, I'll ask you quickly, and I'm going to have to intercede here. It looks like we may lose our quorum, so we're going to have to move on and take some things out of order to get our orders of conditions voted on while we still have a quorum. Allison, I believe in the original order of conditions, we have we asked for everything that Commissioner Richmond just what she just asked for, but I just want to confirm.
I believe so, yes, Chair, but I will double check.
That'd be pretty standard. Okay. Anybody from the public?
No, Chair.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is, in the interest of time here, I'm going to entertain a motion to approve the request for an amendment to the order of conditions for the proposed tree clearing work and replication work as approved by Parks pursuant to a plan approved by Parks that would be in the commission's file prior to any tree removal. Would anybody make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Conan?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
No.
And I vote aye, so that passes 4-1. Thank you. I'm going to read this very quickly and close this out. Continued, there's to the February 15th note. Continued notices of intents here are DEP file number 0061772 and Boston file number 2021-010. DEP file number 0061891 and Boston file number 2022-046. DEP file number 0061704 and Boston file number 2020-007. DEP file number 0061820 and Boston file number 2021-045. Also continue to request for a determination of applicability regarding the property located at 2 Starling, 34 and 36 Willette Street in West Roxbury. Notice of intent for unassigned DEP file number regarding the property located at 1200 Center Street in Roslindale. And notice of intent for DEP file number 0061923 in Boston file number 2022-010. Commission will now begin its regular meeting. We will start with the issuance of orders of conditions. The first one is acceptance of the order of conditions for notice of intent for DEP file number 006 1903. I have to recuse myself from this. So Commissioner Richmond, if no, yeah. Commissioner Long wasn't on the commission yet. So Commissioner Sullivan, Richmond, and Kanan can vote. So Commissioner Richmond, I would ask you to go ahead and take the vote on this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Oops. Thank you very much. Do we have a recommendation from staff with respect to the order of conditions?
Yes, staff recommend that we accept the order as drafted. The order includes the special conditions requested by the staff at the last hearing.
Okay, is there any discussion among the commissioners on this request? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to accept the order of conditions for DEP file number 006-1903.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Commissioner
Oh,
Sullivan.
you're killing
I
me.
know,
You're killing
I
me.
know, I understand. Commissioner Sullivan. It's a
Aye.
vote. Yeah, okay. Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond votes aye. All right, 3-0. We're ready. Thank you
Okay.
very much. Back to the chair.
Thank you. Entertain a motion to accept the following orders of conditions. Notice of intent for Boston file number 2023-007, DEP file number 006-1913, and Boston file number 2022-058. And notice of intent for DEP file number 006-1921 and Boston file number 2023-008. Do I have the motion?
I'm going to move it, and I'm assuming, Mr. Chair, that the staff is recommending the acceptance of these
Yes.
orders with conditions.
Yes.
Okay. So moved.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long.
Have to recuse
Commissioner-
myself because. of
Oh,
the
I am
first
right. I am so sorry. Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Conan, do you have to leave now?
Yes. Thank you, Chair
Okay.
Parker.
So record will reflect that Commissioner Conan left after these votes.
Good night.
Okay, let's go back to request for certificate of compliances, I think, are first, correct?
There's an emergency
No.
certification.
Okay, ratification of emergency certification issued to the to Massport for the placement of stones to stabilize the area directly adjacent to the perimeter roadway along taxiway C within Boston's Logan Airport in East Boston. Allison, what do you have on this?
Thanks, Chair. Staff received a request for an emergency certification from the Massachusetts Port Authority requesting to place around 35 cubic yards of 8+ inch stone to stabilize an area directly adjacent to the perimeter roadway along taxiway C after discovering a washout of existing shoreline materials. Staff performed a site visit on February 16th. And after consultation with DEP, issued an emergency certification on February 22nd. Massport has committed to ensuring that they will come in for an NOI for any actual roadway repair, that they are in the process of evaluating and putting together an NOI for that permanent work.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so with that, any questions from any of the commissioners for Allison? Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to ratify the emergency certification issued to Massport.
So moved.
Thank
Second.
you. Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
and I vote aye, so that carries 4-0. Okay, next item on the agenda is a request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 006-1613 for the construction of a multifamily residential building and off-street parking located at 144 Addison Street in East Boston. This saga started on November 2nd, 2022, and it's been continued several times.
And this
Allison, what do you
saga-
have?
This saga continues. After a follow-up site visit, it appears that several of the stormwater plaques were potentially detached in the last storm, and so they will be replaced before we close this.
Wow. You would not think this would be so hard. Okay, so we will see that again, maybe on March 15th. Next item on the agenda is a request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061867 and Boston file number 2022-026 for the addition of a second story and associated infiltration chamber and landscaping work located at 121 Havre Street in East Boston.
This is again a late request for a continuance after an initial site visit. It appears that some minor construction work is still ongoing.
Okay, thank you. So that's continued. Request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061879 and Boston file number 2022-035 for the excavation and replacement of an asphalt roadway to modify existing underground utility service connections located at 420 Rutherford Ave in East Boston. Oh, okay, that sounds familiar.
It does, Chair. This is an existing open NOI for partial work for the hearing that closed earlier in the hearing. Staff performed a site visit on Wednesday, March 1st to confirm that this work had in fact not begun. And so their request is to close out that old certificate of compliance in favor of the new one.
Okay, so are they asking for a partial COC here?
No, they're asking for a full COC as this work did not ever begin and they don't intend to do it. They modified the request in the form of the new NOI we heard earlier today.
Understood. I get it. Okay. Okay, so with that, I would request a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061879.
I'm happy to do that, but why would we do that and not just cancel it?
Well, because we've issued an order of conditions, so it has to be closed out.
Okay, I move.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so that passes 4-0. Next item on the agenda, administrative updates.
None today.
Okay,
good.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah.
Okay, we might get out by 9. Last item on the agenda, and I did look over the meeting minutes. I had just a couple comments. I think it was the February 1st meeting, and our AI must have hit a glitch because in the span of 1 or 2 sentences, Mr. Roach's name was spelled differently 3 times. So every iteration of Roach.
I will correct the minutes.
The only thing I saw. So with that, would look for a motion to accept the meeting minutes from February 1st and February 15th.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so that carries 4-0. Okay.
Chair, apologies. Before you jump to acclamation, did we note the continuance for the Olmsted Green COC as well? For the
Did I
record,
skip over that?
I think we may have. Anyway, they requested, as we move to that order of conditions, it was a request for a certificate of compliance for 6-58. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061558. Okay, so they would like a
requested
continuance as well.
Yes.
Okay, all unanimous, all continuances for all 4 of those COCs. No, it was 3 to 1.
3 of 4.
Yeah, 3 out of 4. Okay, with that, I would look for a motion to adjourn by acclamation. And thank you very much, Allison and Kat again, and hopefully you won't have to be filling in much longer.
Thank you, Chair. Have a good night.
Go back to your day job. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Good night.